Cathie Wood solo invierte en compañías disruptivas con temáticas de inversión que pueden llegar a cambiar el mundo tal y como lo conocemos. En este vídeo vamos a ver su explicación de lo que ella llama la nueva era de la genética y que dará lugar a la próxima generación de FANGs, es decir, empresas tan increíbles como Google, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Netflix y Microsoft. Si quieres saber en qué empresas invierte, cuándo y a qué precio, quédate hasta el final del vídeo porque te mostraré dónde puedes ver las acciones que tiene en cada momento. Pero primero vamos a conocer de la propia Cathie Wood los cambios que viviremos durante los próximos 5 años.
Which of your current holdings, Cathie, do you think will supply the biggest lift in the next 5 years?
Tesla's still in the running, but I would have to say the biggest upside surprises are going to come from the genomic space. And that's because the convergence of DNA sequencing, artificial intelligence, and gene therapies, importantly, CRISPR gene editing, are going to cure disease. That convergence is going to cure disease. Now we have real science and technology surfacing the mutations in our genomic profile. And as they surface those mutations, what do we see? We see the earliest manifestations of disease. And now, with the combination of artificial intelligence and gene editing, we're able to both anticipate diseases and cure them potentially. Beta thalassemia, we're seeing it, sickle cell disease. We even think it will work in diabetes, which is where most, if you look at the largest category of spending year to year in healthcare, it's diabetes.
Cathie, another surprise for me in your portfolio attribution is that almost none of your performance, just 20 points out of 600 points, is from Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Facebook, the 4 biggest contributors to the S&P 500 over the same period. What about them doesn't make the grade for Cathie Wood and for ARK?
Well, we're not saying they'll be bad stocks at all. In fact, they've been very good stocks. And they were a part of our portfolios in the early days. But as they were scaling into the $1 trillion category, we believed that our research would be focused better on the next set of FANGs. And I don't mean FANGs meaning in the internet age. We actually think the next FANGs are in the genomic age. And if you'll notice our flagship portfolio, the largest exposure is healthcare for that reason.
We've just been talking about Facebook and
Yes.
Google, Alphabet, things like that. Those are obviously huge successes. What's the next Facebook? Give me a tip.
Well, you're right. Those are $1 trillion or approaching $1 trillion companies. And so we don't own actually in our flagship fund any of the FANG except for Netflix, because we are all about finding the next big thing. So the next big things involve our 5 disruptive innovation platforms. So DNA sequencing, robotics with collaborative robots, energy storage, electric vehicles, think Tesla, artificial intelligence. You can also think Tesla on that, but you can think about every company when it comes to AI. And then finally, blockchain technology. So we've had a lot of news on all of them, including blockchain technology and Square's positioning in that space.
So we'll come back to Tesla in a minute, but first of all, talk about genomics.
So genomics, we think, is the most underestimated and misunderstood of our disruptive innovation platforms. And the reason is we have never been able to really cure disease. Now that we're able to isolate mutations through DNA sequencing, think Illumina, that's the foundational stock in this space, we are able to understand where the programming errors in our genome are. And with CRISPR gene editing, increasingly we're beginning to believe we're going to be able to correct those programming errors. I'm going to give you a comparison today versus the tech and telecom bubble. If I had told you in the tech and telecom era that there would be 3 foundational stocks in the CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing space, they own the patents. I would have told, and that they'd get a 10% royalty probably on any therapy derived from CRISPR-Cas9. They, given that we're talking about curing disease here, curing pediatric blindness, curing sickle cell anemia, beta thalassemia, leukemia, they probably would have accumulated to $200 to $300 billion in market cap. Today, the three stocks, Editas, Intelia, and CRISPR Therapeutics, can barely manage to get to $5 billion cumulatively. This is so misunderstood, and so we think it's, again, inefficiently priced.
I have sort of a practical question here. I mean, if somebody says, okay, we're going to have Facebook and we're going to have everybody communicate with each other and be friends, I can sort of understand that. Do I need to be a biophysicist or something to understand this area? I mean, because that might be an interference with capital formation, actually, because I just don't understand it well enough to know whether to invest or not, or which one to invest in.
It is a great question. There is a lot of fear because of a lack of understanding, and it also seems so complicated.
It does.
So at ARK Invest, one of our missions and values is to educate. And I think Simon Barnett, our genomics analyst, is going to start a program, a series called Simon Says, or something like that, to actually break this down and help people understand it, because it's so important. In the world we believe is evolving, one of the most dangerous places to be in terms of the kinds of returns possible out there is in the indexes, because they are being populated increasingly, we believe, by value traps. They're cheap for a reason. I mean, if you look at whether it's banks, energy, auto companies are in massive trouble, pharmaceuticals, if they don't change the way they're doing things. Even rails, we think autonomous truck platoons are going to take the place of rails, or be cheaper to transport freight. So anyone hewing to the benchmarks, which are very backwards looking, they're not about the future. They are about what has worked. We're all about what is going to work. There's a second component to this, and you raised it, time horizon. We're playing an arbitrage between, we're arbitraging, the short-term time horizon that most investors and analysts have, next year maybe, quarter sometimes, compared to our 5-year time horizon. And I can tell you with a straight face that if you give us 5 years, that ARK Invest is a deep value manager.
Antes de que veamos un sencillo método para ver las compras y ventas que realiza Cathie Wood diariamente y que te pueden aportar algunas ideas de inversión, quiero animarte a que te suscribas al canal y que compartas este vídeo si consideras que puede ser interesante para alguna persona que conozcas. La razón por la que puedes ver las compras y ventas que realiza Cathie Wood con sus fondos cada día es que sus fondos están organizados como si fueran ETFs, y por esto están obligados por el regulador a declarar las operaciones que realizan diariamente. La forma de verlo es muy sencilla. Abres Google y en la barra de búsqueda escribes ARK Holdings PDF, y en el primer enlace que te muestra te puedes descargar en formato PDF con su fecha este documento. Aquí podrás ver las acciones en las que está invertida y su peso en el fondo. También aparecen el número de acciones y así puedes compararlo con el informe del día anterior y ver si ha aumentado sus compras o por el contrario ha reducido o vendido su posición en una acción determinada.